Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, MR.Creepy. So today's video is definitely going to creep you out. In this video, we're getting into 4 disturbing true stories that happened during February blizzards, when people found themselves trapped with something far worse than just the cold. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. If you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to like the video and subscribe. Alright, let's get into tonight's stories. I was 29 and driving back from a medical conference in Buffalo when the blizzard warning came through my phone. February 2023, the alert said conditions would deteriorate rapidly after 8 p.m. and I checked my dashboard clock, 7:43. I had maybe 40 minutes before the worst hit, and I was still 2 hours from Syracuse, where I worked as a radiologic technologist. The highway was nearly empty. Most people had the sense to pull off and wait it out. But I had an early shift the next morning, and my supervisor had already written me up twice for tardiness. I told myself I could make it. The snow was falling steadily but not impossibly, and my Accord had good tires. Around 8:15 I saw the lights in my rearview mirror, red and blue flashing through the white. I had not been speeding. If anything, I was going under the limit, but I pulled onto what I thought was the shoulder, though the snow made it hard to tell where the road ended and the embankment began. The patrol car stopped behind me, headlights illuminating the inside of my car. I rolled down my window and waited, watching my side mirror. The driver's door opened and a figure stepped out, tall, wearing what looked like a state trooper's winter jacket and hat. He approached slowly, and I had my license and registration ready. When he reached my window, I noticed his flashlight first. It was not on. He held it in his gloved hand, but the beam stayed dark. His face was mostly shadowed by the hat brim, but I could see his mouth, pale lips pressed into a thin line. "License and registration," he said. His voice was flat, no inflection at all. I handed them over. He looked at my license for a long time, longer than necessary, tilting it back and forth like he was trying to read it in light that was not there. "Step out of the vehicle," he said. "Is something wrong, officer?" "Step out of the vehicle." My hands were shaking as I unbuckled my seatbelt. The wind hit me the moment I opened the door, snow stinging my face. I stood beside my car, arms wrapped around myself, while he walked in a slow circle around the Accord. He did not check the taillights, did not look in the windows, just circled, boots crunching in the fresh snow. "Pop the trunk," he said. I reached back inside and pulled the lever. The trunk clicked open. He walked to the back of my car and stood there, staring into the trunk for what felt like a full minute. I had nothing in there except a gym bag and an empty cooler. Then he closed it and walked back to me. "You're going to follow me," he said. "Follow you where? Off this highway. Roads closing. Everyone's being diverted." I looked past him at the empty stretch of interstate. No other cars, no road crew, no barricades, just snow and darkness. "I haven't seen any signs about a closure," I said. His head tilted slightly, not like a nod, like something adjusting its angle to see me better. "Follow me," he repeated, and walked back to his patrol car. I stood there in the wind, watching him get in. His headlights stayed on, pointing at my car. I had a choice to make, and I made it in about 5 seconds. I got back in my Accord, put it in drive, and when he pulled forward, I did not follow. I turned my wheel hard to the left and drove straight past him, back onto the highway. In my rearview mirror, I saw his car sit there for a moment. Then the lights went out. Completely. No headlights, no flashes, just gone. I drove 15 miles without looking back, hands locked on the wheel, before I saw a real rest stop with lights and people. I pulled in and sat in the parking lot with the engine running, trying to breathe normally. I called the state police non-emergency line on my cell, told them what happened. They took my information and said they would look into it. A trooper called me back 3 days later and told me there were no patrol units on that stretch of highway during the time I described. They had pulled all their cars off the road an hour before the blizzard hit. I asked what kind of car had stopped me then. He did not have an answer, but then he said something that made my stomach turn. He asked me if the officer had touched anything inside my trunk, if he had placed anything in there. I told him no, that he had just stared into it for a long time, The trooper was quiet for a moment. Then he told me there had been 3 other reports over the past 2 years. Drivers pulled over during storms by someone in a patrol car. All of them were told to follow. 2 of them did. Those 2 drivers were found 3 days apart, both in February of the previous year. One in a ravine off Route 17. One in a dense wooded area near the Pennsylvania border. Both cars driven off remote exits. Both drivers were found in their trunks. The trooper told me they never found who did it. The case was still open. He told me I was lucky I did not follow. I asked him why someone would do that. Why pretend to be police? Why target people during storms? He said he did not know, but the profile suggested someone who understood how vulnerable people are when they're alone on empty roads in bad weather. Someone who knew that most people trust a uniform. Someone who had probably done this before, in other states, other winters, and had never been caught because storm conditions erased most of the evidence. I still drive that route for work, but I never drive it at night anymore. And when I see police lights in my mirror now, I wait until I can see the officer's face clearly in my window. Before I hand over anything, I wait until I can see their flashlight turn on. I wait until I am sure they are real, because I keep thinking about that trunk, about how long he stood there, staring into it, about what he was measuring, what he was imagining, and I think about the 2 people who followed him, about how they must have felt when they realized too late that the exit he was leading them to was not on any map, that the road was getting narrower, that the lights behind them were the last lights they would ever see. I was lucky, I know that, but luck is just chance, and chance runs out eventually. I just hope mine holds the next time I see red and blue lights flashing through the snow. I had been living in the rental house on Timber Ridge Road for 8 months when the February blizzard hit. 26 years old, working remotely for an insurance company, and still trying to figure out why my engagement had fallen apart the previous summer. The house was cheap because it was old and drafty, situated on a dead-end street with only 3 other properties, all spaced far enough apart that you could not see your neighbor's lights at night. The forecast had been talking about the storm for days. I stocked up on canned food, filled the bathtub with water, and made sure my laptop was charged. When the power went out around 11 p.m. on Wednesday, I was ready. I had candles, a battery-powered radio, and enough blankets to survive until the utility crews could get things running again. What I was not ready for was the sound that woke me up at 2 a.m. A generator. Loud, rattling, coming from somewhere close. I lay in bed listening to it, feeling irrationally annoyed that one of my neighbors had a generator, and I did not. The sound was steady, unpleasant, cutting through the muffled silence of the snowstorm. I got up and looked out my bedroom window. The house, directly to my right, maybe 200 feet away through the trees, had a light on in the basement window, just a single yellow glow, barely visible through the snow. That had to be where the generator was running. I tried to go back to sleep, but the noise kept drilling into my head. Around 3 a.m., I put on my boots and coat and walked outside with a flashlight, thinking maybe I could see which neighbor it was, and ask them in the morning if they could shut it off at night. The snow was knee-deep already, and the wind made it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. I got halfway across my yard when the generator stopped, just cut off mid-rattle, leaving this enormous silence that felt wrong somehow. I stood there in the dark, my flashlight beam swallowed by the falling snow, and I waited to see if it would start up again. It did not. I went back inside and managed to fall asleep around 4 a.m. The next night, the same thing happened. The generator started up at 2 a.m. exactly. I checked my phone to confirm the time, and sure enough, 2 on the dot. It ran for about an hour, then stopped abruptly. By the 3rd night, I was exhausted and angry. When I heard it start at 2 a.m. again, I decided I was going to walk over there and knock on the door. I did not care that it was the middle of the night. I did not care that we were in the middle of a blizzard. I just wanted to sleep. I bundled up and went outside, following the sound through the trees. The snow had stopped falling, but it was piled everywhere, and the temperature had dropped so low that my breath froze in my nostrils. The generator was definitely coming from the house to my right, the one with the basement light. As I got closer, I realized something was off. The house looked abandoned. No smoke from the chimney. No footprints in the snow around the property. No tire tracks in the driveway. Just that single light in the basement window and the sound of the generator. I walked up to the front door and knocked. The sound echoed inside, but nobody came. I knocked again, harder, and called out that I was a neighbor. Nothing. I walked around to the side of the house where the basement window was. The light was on, but the window was too high for me to see inside properly. I could only see the ceiling, stained and water damaged. The generator was directly below that window, sitting on the ground outside, a red portable unit covered in snow, running at full capacity. The fuel tank was clearly visible, and I did not understand how it was still running after 3 nights. I walked up to it, thinking I would just turn it off myself, and that is when I saw the extension cord. It ran from the generator, across the snow, and into the basement through a small gap in the window frame. Somebody had deliberately set this up, but the house looked like nobody had been there in weeks. I followed the cord with my flashlight beam, tracing it to the window. That is when I saw something inside that made my stomach drop. The light was not coming from a lamp. It was coming from a work light, the kind construction workers use, sitting on the floor, and next to it was a sleeping bag, a cooler, a camping stove. Someone was living down there. I stepped back from the window, my boots crunching in the snow, and the generator stopped. Not sputtered out, not gradually, just stopped, exactly like it had the previous nights. In the silence, I heard something else. Movement from inside the basement. Footsteps on the concrete floor, slow and deliberate, moving toward the window. I ran. I did not think about it. I just ran through the snow, stumbling and falling twice, my flashlight beam jerking wildly. When I reached my house, I locked every door and window. I pushed furniture against the back door, and I sat in my living room with a kitchen knife until sunrise. When the power came back on the next day, I called the landlord and asked about the house next to mine. He was quiet for a long moment, then asked me which house I meant. I described it, the one to my right with the basement window. He told me that house had been condemned 8 months ago. Structural damage, black mold, unsafe foundation. Nobody was supposed to be living there. Nobody had permission to be on that property. I told him someone was definitely there, that they had a generator, a camping setup, that they had been running it every night at 2 a.m. He said he would call the county sheriff and have them check it out. He called me back 3 hours later. The deputies had gone to the property. They found the basement window broken, the gap where the extension cord had been fed through. They found the work light, the sleeping bag, the cooler with fruit inside, the camping stove. But they also found something else. On the wall, written in what looked like marker, were notes, dozens of them, times, dates, descriptions of movements, my movements. 2:15 a.m., leaves bedroom light on. 11:30 p.m., kitchen light off. 7:45 a.m., drives away in Civic. 6:20 p.m., returns, alone. The deputy told me whoever had been staying there had been watching my house, documenting my routine, learning my schedule. The generator was not for heat or light. It was a test, to see how I would react, to see if I would come outside, to see if I would come to the house. They set up surveillance cameras around both properties and increased patrols in the area, but the person never came back. The generator was gone. The camping equipment was gone. Whoever it was had disappeared the moment I got close enough to see inside. The deputy told me I was lucky I ran when I did. The people who set up observation posts like that are planning something specific, that they are patient, that they wait for the perfect moment. I moved out 2 weeks later, before my lease was up, lost my deposit, did not care, but I still think about those notes on the wall, about how detailed they were, about how long someone had been watching me without my knowledge, about what they were waiting for. And I think about the generator stopping the moment I got close to that window, about the footsteps moving toward me in the dark, about how they knew I was there. I check my windows every night now. I keep my curtains closed. I vary my schedule randomly so no one can predict my movements, because I know what it feels like to be studied, to be observed like a specimen in a jar, to realize that your privacy is an illusion and someone has been watching you sleep, watching you eat, watching you exist, and the worst part is not knowing who it was, not knowing if they found someone else to watch, not knowing if they are still out there, in another condemned house, next to another unsuspecting person, writing notes on another wall, running another generator at 2 a.m., waiting to see who comes to investigate, waiting for someone who does not run fast enough. The stranded family. I was 31 and working night shifts at a rural hospital in northern Maine when the blizzard hit in February 2024. I was a nurse in the emergency department, and they had asked for volunteers to stay through the storm since half the staff could not make it in. I said yes because I needed the overtime and because my apartment felt too empty after my boyfriend moved out. My shift ended at 7 a.m., and by then the snow had been falling for 9 hours straight. The roads were supposed to be closed, but I had my Subaru, and I figured I could make the 12-mile drive home if I went slow. The hospital administrator told me I could sleep in one of the on-call rooms, but I just wanted my own bed. I made it about 8 miles before I saw them. A minivan was stopped on the side of the road, hazard lights blinking weakly through the snow. As I got closer, I could see people inside. I slowed down, debating whether to stop. Every instinct told me to keep driving, to not get involved. But I had spent the last 10 hours helping people, and I could not just leave someone stranded. I pulled up behind them and got out. The wind immediately cut through my scrubs, even under my winter coat. I walked to the driver's side window, and a man rolled it down. He looked about 40, wearing a heavy jacket, with tired eyes. "Thank God," he said. "Our van died about 20 minutes ago. No heat. I've got my wife and 2 kids in here." I looked in the back seat. A woman sat there with 2 children, maybe 6 and 8 years old, bundled in blankets. They looked cold, but not in immediate danger. "Do you have cell service?" I asked. "No. Been trying. Nothing out here." I checked my phone. He was right. No signal. "I can give you a ride," I said. "There's a fire station about 4 miles back. They'll have heat, and you can wait there until the road's clear." The man looked back at his family, then at me. All 5 of us were fit. My Subaru was small, but I thought we could manage. "It'll be tight, but yeah." They got out quickly. The father helped his kids. The mother grabbed a backpack. I noticed she did not say anything, just kept her eyes down. The kids were quiet too. No complaining, no questions, just silent. We all squeezed into my car. The father took the passenger seat. The mother and 2 kids crammed into the back. It was uncomfortable, but I figured 4 miles was manageable. I started driving, and that is when the father said something that made my hands tighten on the wheel. "We really appreciate this. We've been out here since yesterday afternoon." I glanced at him. "Yesterday? The storm just started last night." "Right, yeah, last night. That's what I meant." But he had said yesterday afternoon. I kept my eyes on the road, trying to see through the snow. The defroster was working overtime with 5 people breathing in the small space. "What happened to your van?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just died. Engine trouble, I think." I nodded. In my rearview mirror, I could see the mother. She was staring at the back of the father's head with an expression I could not quite read. Not anger, something else. Something that made my stomach feel strange. One of the kids, the older one, started to say something, and the mother put her hand on the child's shoulder, squeezed. The kid went quiet immediately. We drove in silence for maybe 2 minutes before I noticed the smell. Faint at first, then stronger. A chemical smell, like cleaning products mixed with something metallic and wrong. "We had a gas leak," the father said suddenly, like he could read my mind. "In the van. That's probably what you're smelling." Fumes got on our clothes. I did not respond. The fire station should have been visible by now, but the snow was so heavy, I could not see more than 20 feet ahead. I was starting to worry I had somehow missed it. "You live around here?" the father asked. "Nearby," I said, keeping it vague. "Where exactly?" Something in his tone made me lie. "About 30 miles south. I was just covering a shift at the hospital." "Which hospital?" I named one in the opposite direction from where I actually worked. He nodded slowly. "That's pretty far." In the mirror, I saw the mother lean forward slightly. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something, then closed it. Her hand was still on the older kid's shoulder, gripping tight, and then I saw something that made my blood run cold. The kid's wrist. There were marks on it, red war marks that looked like rope burns or zip tie cuts, fresh enough that they had not scabbed over yet. I forced myself to keep driving normally, to not react, but my mind was racing. The mother's silence, the kid's unnatural quietness, the smell, the rope burns, the way he kept asking where I lived. I saw the fire station lights through the snow, and relief flooded through me. I pulled into the parking lot, which had been plowed recently. There were 2 trucks parked there, and lights on inside. "Here we are," I said, putting the car in park. The father did not move. He sat there looking at the building, then at me. "You know what? I think we're okay," he said. "We don't want to bother them. Maybe you could just take us to a hotel or something. There's no hotels for another 15 miles, and the roads are closed. You'll be safe here. They'll have heat and—" "We're fine," he said, and his voice had changed. Flatter, harder. That is when the mother moved. She shoved the door open and grabbed both kids, pulling them out of the car so fast I barely registered it. She ran toward the fire station, stumbling in the snow, dragging her children with her. The father lunged for the door handle, but I hit the locks. He yanked at it, cursing, and I started screaming, leaning on the horn. The sound was deafening in the small space. The fire station door opened, and 2 firefighters came out. The mother reached them, crying, pointing at my car. One of the firefighters started running toward us. The father stopped pulling at the door. He turned to look at me, and I will never forget his face. Completely calm. Not angry, not panicked, just calm. "You should have minded your business," he said quietly. Then he smiled, and it was the most horrible thing I had ever seen. The firefighter reached my car, and I unlocked the doors. The father got out slowly, hands raised, saying something about a misunderstanding. But the mother was sobbing, holding her kids, telling the firefighters that this man was not her husband, that he had forced them into the van yesterday morning at a rest stop outside Portland, that her actual husband was still in the van, that he had hit him with something and she did not know if he was alive. The firefighters restrained the man while one of them called 911. I sat in my car shaking, watching through the windshield as the mother held her children and cried into their hair. The police arrived 40 minutes later. They found the van where I had passed it. The real father was in the very back, behind the 3rd row of seats, unconscious but alive. He had a serious head injury and severe hypothermia. They airlifted him to my hospital actually, and I saw him 2 days later when I went back to work. He survived, but he did not remember much about the attack. The man I had picked up was named Dennis Yaw, 38 years old, no fixed address. He had a record going back 15 years. Assault, abduction, robbery. He had been released from prison 8 months earlier and had dropped off parole supervision. The mother told police he had been watching them at the rest stop, waiting until the father went inside to use the bathroom. He had a tire iron. He hit the father as soon as he came back to the van, then forced the mother to drive while he held the kids in the back seat. He kept asking where they lived, what their house looked like, if they had family nearby, if anyone would notice. If they did not come home, she said he made them drive north for hours, deeper into rural areas, until the van started having engine trouble, and finally died on that empty road. She said she had been praying for someone to come, anyone, but she was also terrified because she did not know what he would do if someone stopped. When I picked them up, she had been trying to figure out how to signal me without him noticing. The hand on her kid's shoulder was not just to keep them quiet. She had been squeezing in a pattern. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. Over and over. She did not know if I would understand. She just kept doing it and hoping. I had not noticed. I had been too focused on driving, on the weather, on the father's strange questions. I had not seen what she was trying to tell me, but I had seen the rope burns, and I had lied about where I worked, and I had driven to the fire station instead of taking them where he wanted to go. The detective told me that if I had taken them to a hotel like he asked, or if I had told him where I really lived, the situation would have ended very differently. He said Dennis Yu had been moving toward abduction and home invasion, that the family would have been leveraged to get into a house, to get access to money, to whatever else he wanted, that based on his history and psychological profile, none of them would have survived. I gave my statement 3 times, testified at his trial 9 months later. He stared at me the entire time I was on the stand, never blinked, just stared with that same calm expression he had in my car. He got 40 years. No parole. The mother sent me a letter after the trial. She thanked me for stopping, for not leaving them on that road, for taking them somewhere public instead of somewhere isolated. She said she did not know if I had seen her SOS signal or if it was just luck, but either way, I had saved their lives. I wrote her back and told her the truth, that I had not seen her signal, that I had just gotten lucky, that I almost made the wrong choice a dozen times during that drive. She wrote back one more time. She said maybe it was not luck, maybe it was instinct, maybe some part of me knew something was wrong, even if I could not articulate it. Maybe that is what saved them. I do not know if I believe that. I think I just got lucky. I think if the fire station had been 1 mile further, or if I had not noticed those marks on the kid's wrist, or if I had been a little more trusting, a little less paranoid, everything would have gone differently. I still pick up stranded people sometimes. I still stop when I see someone who needs help, but I am more careful now. I watch for the small things, the inconsistencies, the silences that feel wrong, the questions that probe too deep, and I never, ever tell strangers where I really live, because sometimes the people asking for help are not the ones who need it most. Sometimes the victims are the quiet ones in the back seat, squeezing out a signal you almost miss. Sometimes the danger is sitting right next to you, smiling, asking questions, waiting for you to make one wrong turn. And sometimes the difference between a regular good deed and a fatal mistake is nothing more than noticing a mark on a child's wrist and choosing to trust what your gut is screaming at you to see. I was 27 and 6 weeks into my job as a municipal snowplow driver when the Valentine's Day blizzard hit in 2025. I had taken the position after dropping out of a geology PhD program, needing something physical and mindless while I figured out what to do with my life. The pay was decent, the hours were terrible, and most nights I had the roads completely to myself. They called me in at 10 p.m. on February 14th. The storm was supposed to dump 2 feet of snow overnight, and the supervisor wanted all the main routes cleared by morning rush hour. I did not mind. I had no Valentine's plans, and my studio apartment felt smaller every day. My route covered a 20-mile loop through the rural outskirts of town, mostly back roads and county highways that connected small clusters of houses. I had driven it maybe 15 times by then, enough to know the landmarks even in the dark. I started my route around 11 p.m., the plow blade scraping asphalt, snow piling up on both sides. The radio played classic rock, and I settled into the rhythm of it, the repetitive back and forth that required just enough attention to keep me awake, but not enough to really think. Around 1 a.m., I saw the car. It was pulled off to the side of Harper Road, a dark sedan with its trunk open. Hazards were on, and I could see someone moving near the back of the vehicle. I slowed down, trying to see if they needed help. As I got closer, I saw it was a woman, maybe in her 30s, wearing a winter coat. She was pulling something out of the trunk, a large duffel bag, it looked like. She glanced up as my plow approached, and even through the snow, I could see her face clearly in my headlights. She did not look distressed. She looked focused. I stopped the plow and rolled down my window. "You okay?" She paused, then nodded. "Fine. Car trouble. Waiting for a tow. In this storm, nobody's coming out until morning. I called someone. They're coming. Out until morning. I called someone. They're coming." Something felt off. Her car was running. I could see exhaust coming from the tailpipe. And she was not dressed like someone stranded. She was dressed like someone working. Heavy gloves. Insulated boots. The kind of preparation you have when you plan to be outside. "You sure? I can radio. I'm fine," she said, sharper now. "Thank you." She turned away from me and dragged the duffel bag toward the tree line. It was heavy. I could tell by the way she leaned back to pull it, leaving a deep gouge in the snow. I should have driven away, should have radioed it in and kept going, but instead, I sat there watching as she disappeared into the trees, the bag dragging behind her. I put the plow in park, and got out. The trunk was still open. I walked over and looked inside with my flashlight. It was empty, except for a dark stain on the carpet liner and a smell that made my throat tighten, metallic and chemical at the same time. I heard footsteps behind me and turned around. She was back, standing 10 feet away. Hands empty now, no bag, just standing there in the falling snow, watching me. "You should go," she said quietly. "What's in the bag?" "Nothing that concerns you. There's blood in your trunk." She took a step closer. "You drive this route twice a week. Tuesday and Friday nights. You take your break at Miller Road around 3 a.m. You always get coffee from the same thermos." My chest went cold. "How do you know that?" "I've been waiting for you," she said. "I needed someone consistent, someone who would cover the tracks. Your plow was perfect." I backed toward my truck, and she matched my pace. "What did you bury out there?" She smiled, but it was wrong. "Empty. Go finish your route. By morning, no one will know I was ever here." I ran for the plow, locked myself inside, and radioed dispatch. Police found the car an hour later, abandoned. They searched the woods with dogs and found disturbed snow, but no bag, no body, nothing. The car was registered to Claire Portman, reported missing 3 days earlier. They never found her, but they found something else. In her apartment, they found a journal, pages of notes about my route, my schedule, my habits. She'd been planning this for weeks. The detective said, I interrupted something, that whatever she buried out there, she had been counting on my plow to hide it. I quit 2 days later, but sometimes I still think about that smile, about how she knew everything about me, and I wonder what I drove over the next morning, covering it with snow, exactly like she planned.